With Salim Ali starting the trend for bird watching, today we have Tara Gandhi in conversation with Bikram Grewal, the new legends on birds and conservation. We hope for a better feathered understanding. Over to you, Vikram.
Tara, welcome to Kasauli. You know, this is the hotbed of birds of the western Himalayas. People come here to watch birds, watch the trees, watch the stones of which we spoke about yesterday, watch the butterflies, and you are here for releasing or talking about your new book, which is a compilation of the great birdman Salim Ali's radio broadcast. Tara is one of India's leading bird watchers and has compiled a book on Salim Ali, who is the great daddy of Indian bird watching, his writings. And now, where she found these podcasts or these radio broadcasts from, she'll tell us. And I think without much delay, we don't have very much time, so why don't you start talking about your book?
So what an amazing honor it is and privilege for me to be here in this gathering of such distinguished people, and to be in Kasauli and to be at the Khushwant Singh Literary Festival and the Green Festival at that. What could be better for me? Thank you. So I'm going to actually start with a presentation on the book. So I'll move there.
Can people see?
So that's the book. Yeah. So the interesting thing about Salim Ali is that actually his whole life was one of change. It was change in change he was a change maker. He experienced change, and he also told us about change. So this book is about his radio talks, So now Salim Ali was really famous. I mean, he was almost a household name for people of one generation. And what is wonderful is that even now, people, even young people, still do, respond to his name, which is nice. And of course, he became famous from this one book, the Book of Indian Birds, which was published sometime in the 1940s. But after that, he was called the Birdman of India. He was called the father of Indian ornithology. He was called the greatest, ornithologist in India. And he had all these big names to himself. And this book became a bestseller. It went into several editions, which is really interesting because, I think it's because of his style, the style in which he wrote. He made it accessible to people to learn about birds in a more easy and friendly way, because till then, the bird books were all kind of heavy documents. They were more like chronicles, I would say. So he published all these books, Birds of Sikkim, Birds of Kerala, and Birds of India. And of course, his magnum opus was this 10-volume handbook of the birds of India and Pakistan. Now, don't ask me why it's called a handbook. I would call it a shoulder book or a backpack book or a wheelbarrow book, because it's just 10 massive volumes of. The remarkable thing is he has actually documented, or rather described in this 10 volumes, almost every bird species in that whole area which was known during those times. So it's a combination of his own personal observations and a combination of research that he has done from past ornithologists and past British and others who had actually put down some records earlier. So now, so he became a legend in his lifetime. He was quite an engaging personality, so he became quite popular. Even he used to go to schools and lead them I think Doon School and such schools used to go and lead children for bird walks and things. And he had this amazing ability to relate to people of all sections of life, you know. He had befriended Rajas and Maharajas. He could, talk to bureaucrats. He could talk to, children, scientists. And he himself was a scientist. He was a deep scientist at heart. So these were all books that were written about him. And there's a stamp that came out about him. A comic book has come out about him. And he was given, of course, the Padma Vibhushan. And he was a Rajya Sabha member at the end of his life. So, where's that? This way? Yeah. So now, what was less known about him was this great desire to communicate, you know. He really wanted to, as a scientist, he didn't want to keep all this science within himself. He wanted it to get out there. He wanted everybody to know more about birds and actually about how valuable they are. And we'll come to that a little later. He wants to inculcate in people the love of birds, the enjoyment of birds, plus to understand their value. You know, that is so important to him. That was his passion. But how does he go about it? He writes all these books. He writes articles in papers. He writes articles in journals and all that. But he uses the most powerful medium of those times, which is the radio. This was before TV. This was before internet. Before all these new ways in which we communicate nowadays. So he used radio. And those of us, my age and younger than me also, I'm sure, will remember that our radio was on all the time at home. You know, we were either listening to music or listening to a talk or listening to something or the other. Radio was on all the time. So he uses this great and powerful medium to communicate about birds, and he gives about 35 talks over a period of 40 years. So starting from 1940s right up to the last one he delivered about just 2 years before he died. He lived to 91, and his last, he died in 87, and the last talk is in 1985. Now, how does he go about it? You know, it's wonderful how he speaks. You know, he speaks with a combination of humor and to engage the audience and to give a lot of information as well. So he laughs about himself. So he said, I look like a khaki-clad garage mechanic type. So, you know, people laugh at him and say, you look like a garage mechanic type. And then somebody said to him, you know, he was a small-made man with a big nose. So somebody said to him, Saab, you are like a bird yourself. So he said, maybe because I sing very sweetly. You know, so he made jokes about himself. And actually, he had a very crackly voice. His voice wouldn't have suited the radio at all, but that is what he making, you know, fun of himself. And so this is not very known that he delivered all these radio broadcasts. And so he says the object of these talks is to interest the listener, not necessarily to, you know, pump them in with, closer, okay. Not to pump them in with a lot of scientific data, but to make them interested, to engage them. So that's what he did, and he wanted to tell them, as I said before, to enjoy birds and to understand their value. So now, you know, how it came about, as Bikram kindly mentioned, is that, you know, I had access to some of his papers. I was a student, and I had access, I requested the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library to give me access to his archival papers. And while going through them, I came across this sheet of paper which just had a list. It just said radio talks. And it gave a list of all the radio talks that he'd given over the years with the date, with the recording station, and all those details. So, you know, I was puzzling over it because I hadn't come across those scripts before. So I went to the Bombay Natural History Society, and luckily they had all the scripts. And for me, it was really absolutely wonderful to see these scripts, you know, and to see how he actually he would type them himself, and he would correct them by hand. And so for me, it was wonderful to actually see those, because I was familiar with his handwriting, and this was much after he had died. So it was, it was a great work that I really enjoyed doing, and it gave me a lot as well. So it's like a treasure chest, you suddenly open this and you see all these wonderful scripts that have never been exposed to the public. So I thought it really needs to be, and I must thank my publishers also who really warmed to the idea, so it's now out in the public domain and not lying in our archives and for people to enjoy and learn from. So, because of this, of this urge to talk to people and all that, he used different ways of communicating, even in his radio talks. So one talk is for children who don't know English. So he spoke in Hindustani. But he didn't know how to write in Urdu, the script, so he wrote the entire thing in the Roman script. So it was really a lovely read. And in fact, the way he explains to children is that, some birds are like masons, some birds are like weavers, some are like tailors. So he, makes them really understand it so well. So the children, now they'll wonder, why is it that he's calling a flamingo a mason? So now they'll have to find out, isn't it? That how it scoops the mud and makes its own nest and things like that. So this is the way he kind of, he was a teacher in that respect. So this is a sample of the script. It was a beautifully written with old-fashioned typewriter and no laptops or computers those days, and corrected by hand. He had a very beautiful handwriting as well, very, very meticulous. When I was doing my research with him, I had to send reports, every month or every week, and they'd come back to me not only with big slashes where I had gone wrong, but every punctuation mark was corrected. A little dash here, a little comma there, and every spelling mistake. So one had to be really particular when you're sending your reports to him. So that was interesting. So what is the content? He gave 35 talks, and they were all, on different subjects. So one of them is I'll just give you a little glimpse of some of them. So one of them, he said, I'm frequently asked this question, how did I get interested in birds? That's a common question. So he then talks about the story, which has actually become quite famous, that when he was about 10 years old, one of his uncles gave him an air gun. And his great fun was to go to the garden and shoot sparrows. So that's what he did. And he would shoot them, and what did he do with them? He'd take them to the kitchen and get them cooked for the little snack. So that was his deep interest in birds at the age of 10. So while he was doing that, one sparrow that he shot had a yellow patch on his throat. So he got interested. It sort of sparked his interest. So he took it home, and nobody could tell what it was in his house. So somebody suggested you go to the Bombay Natural History Society, and there are people who are experts who will explain to you what it is. So he did that. So this is from the comic book, a picture from the comic book, where he goes to this BNHS, Bombay Natural, and he's quite scared. He said, I was terrified. He said, look how he puts it. One of my rare occasions of successful murder, I noticed that the victim, supposed to be a sparrow, had a strange patch. So then they explained to him that it was not actually an ordinary sparrow, but it was a much rarer bird, which is called the yellow-throated sparrow. So, you can't hear me? Oh dear. So it was called the yellow-throated sparrow. I'm so sorry, apologies. All right, yeah, is this better? Is this better? Okay, good. So then, so he goes there, and they do explain to him, and they were quite polite and nice. And so he says, look at what he says, like ripples from a pebble dropped in water, the circles of my interest in ornithology widened. It's a nice way of putting it, I thought. So then he grows up and he becomes a young man, and he's never got interested in studies. He was never interested in studies. As a schoolboy, he didn't want to study. He didn't do very well in college either. But he had a wonderfully supportive family, and they were into business and into a lot of other, they had businesses in India and in Burma. They sent him off. They said, okay, you learn chartered accountancy. They made him learn chartered accountancy, and they sent him off. But he couldn't make a success of any of his jobs. And he also took up a small job, being like a nature guide somewhere. He got really bored. And so he said that, But his desire to learn ornithology was so deep in him that he just gave up everything. And he said that, ornithology is the Cinderella of Indian sciences, that nobody wants her. So I'm going away. And he went off to Germany, where in Germany he was able to learn from very eminent professors like this Professor Erwin Streisman. I don't know how to pronounce his name, sorry. And he learned all the techniques of bird study, how to actually look at birds in the field, how to measure them, how to track them, how to do bird ringing. All those techniques he learned. And he also found that in Germany, ordinary people, like he talks about a barber who would all day cut people's hair, but on Sundays he'd go off bird watching. And he would actually help a professor in the university by getting some records for him. So he said, this is the extent of knowledge about ornithology in Europe. Why not happen in India? So when he came back to India, that was his major desire, I would say. But he was jobless. He'd left all his jobs. He had no prospects for the future, and only his family to support him. But he didn't want that either. He was also married by then. So he goes again to the Bombay Natural History Society. And he talks about, why am I telling about his life? Is because he talks about all this in his radio talks, yeah. So he goes back to BNHS, and they give him some grants. They give him some grants, and they give him, and then he also has a lot of other benefactors, people who are helping him. And he also manages to get some support from the royal families, the Mysore royal family, Travancore royal family. And with that support, he scours the length and breadth of the country. He camps all over the place. And he records birds from north to south, east to west of India. And it's an amazing exercise. His wife also goes with him. I don't know if you can see, but she's peeping out that little tram car there. And they camp in the most primitive tents out in the jungle. And they record birds, and they write about the birds over there. And look at the kind of transport he uses, camelback, boats, rickety cars, and elephant, bullock carts, and of course on foot, a lot on foot as well. So, and he has really funny stories, interesting stories to tell about these expeditions, how he talks about expeditions. It's really interesting how he talks about them. And he, of course, he tells you about the, like for instance, in Sikkim, he tells about the gradient, how the flora and fauna change over the gradient from the foothills to the top, and how they walk up there. And then a really funny story is, I don't know if I should read that out to you, but he says that when he was trekking in Sikkim, they had to have porters. And the porters were all women. And he said that they were so agile and they were so strong, and they could carry like 40 to 50 kilos on their backs and run up and down the hillside. And he said, when I was up there, I was exhausted, and it really hurt my male pride to see these women looking fresh as a daisy when they reach up the top. So all this kind of, he bungs in all this into his radio talks, and that makes the whole thing so kind of a good read, you know what I mean, yeah. So then another fascinating thing that he talks about is bird migration. That's something he also learned in Germany. And, he wants to talk about look at the wonder. He said the riddle of migration has enthralled man and held his wonderment over the ages. So this is what, really it is a wonder. And look, whether it's a small warbler, which is hardly as big as that, or a crane, which is about as big as that, they do these amazing journeys from the Arctic Circle down to the equator and even below. And how do they do it? Even now, scientists are puzzling over it. And scientists and, geologists, geographers are all puzzling over how they have that energy to fly over, huge swaths of water, sea. Over the sea they fly. Over land they fly without a break. How do they navigate? People, as they are still puzzling over it, exactly some magnetism, is it they look at the stars, how do they do it? We still don't really know. So he talks about how wonderful all that is, And he also, then later on, of course, he joined the Bombay Natural Society as the top person there. And he instituted these migration studies. So you could see that the birds that come to India come from all near the Arctic Circle, from Mongolia and Siberia, and they do these incredible journeys. And of course, he was very interested in bird nests, and the Baya was his particular favorite, and he was always astounded by how this little bird can, use ordinary materials to build this basket-like nest, that's a kind of a freak nest that he has found with his friend. But now, actually, we're coming to the most significant part of what Salim Ali was all about. And that is the value of birds. This is what he wanted everybody to understand, that how valuable they are. Now we go in the countryside, we see a beautiful flash of blue, and we say, oh, that's a roller, how pretty. Or we see a cattle egret sitting, and you say, oh, how cute. That's all. We just take it for granted. We see these birds, we take them for granted. But what he emphasizes, what they're doing. What they're doing for us, what they're doing for agriculture, what they're doing for nature. So that is something he wanted to emphasize. And that's why he talks about pollinators, which increase productivity, about insect controllers, the insectivorous birds, which of course is obvious how much insects they control. Otherwise our earth would be just consumed with insects. They are the most prolific breeding creatures on earth. And if they hadn't been for some sort of natural control by birds, it would be a tough life for us. And then the bird dispersers who eat the fruits and disperse the seeds. And we shouldn't forget our water birds that are actually fertilizing the water and the soil so that farmers actually draw that water and use it for their fields to save a lot of money on chemical fertilizers. Then he talks about the owls. His utter favorite are the owls. And he says there's so many superstitions about owls. People are scared of them, but this is completely mislaid. And look what he says. Look at the strong language he uses, apart from the jovial language he uses all the time. In between, he has these really strong worded things like, man axes his own legs. And he says that because these birds are the staunchest allies in the ceaseless battle against, like the locust. So he says people have to understand this. And he talks about the way we need to protect and conserve these birds. And he instituted a new subject. He brought in a new subject called economic ornithology into agricultural science. So this was a change maker. As a change maker, he brought in this, and he also tried to see that bird watching and ornithology are not just small subjects. There's zoology in it, there is botany in it, there's entomology in it, there is geography in it, there's climate-related studies in it. So all this he wanted to bring into the subject. And of course, we're talking about Jekyll and Hyde just now, it's so funny that Dr. Salim Ali also talked about Jekyll and Hyde birds, which are the sparrows. Which sparrows can, if they come in a huge flock and settle on a field, they can really decimate it. And it caused a lot of distress to farmers. And so he does talk about policy that may need to be done to protect the crops, not necessarily to eliminate sparrows, but to protect your crops in such a way that sparrows don't come and decimate them. And also understand that for half their lives, when they are chicks, they have to be fed on protein food. And protein food is what? Insects and caterpillars and worms and things like that. They have to be fed. And those are how sparrows are actually contributing to keeping the crops free of pests in many ways. So they are Jekyll and Hyde. Part of their lives they are good, part of their lives they are bad. So it's like that. So, these are all the ecosystems in India. And he was really concerned about them all, He said, we are so blessed. We have this huge diversity. I mean, we have these mountains from our window, and we have a sea, we have deserts, we have mangroves, we have grasslands and forests. I mean, India is really incredible that way, and we have rivers and lakes. So his idea was to protect all that. When you protect all that, you're protecting birds. When you're protecting birds, you're helping ourselves. So it's that logical stream of thought that he wants to bring in to us. It's not just birds, you're looking at birds, they're pretty and okay and all that, but it is something much more deep than that. So, but are these habitats really good? Look what we're doing to them. Look at the anthropogenic pressure on them. So our coasts, our water bodies, yesterday actually Pranay Lal talked about how important water bodies are for, say, mitigating climate change. So our water bodies are becoming dump yards for junk, or they're getting encroached along the edges. And we've over-concretized everywhere, and we have, deforested hillsides to make plantations, and we have sprayed pesticide everywhere. So, what are we doing? What are we doing to our nature? So this is all what he wanted us to understand, that there has to be good conservation measures, that we should use appropriate. We have to do all these things, but do them in an appropriate manner. We have to perhaps use some pesticide, but see if you can use organic. You see if you can go in a way that's appropriate and not necessarily, going over the top. So that's what his message and his vision was. And so he also wanted to say, now look what happens if you do that. Now suppose you over-concretize a place. There are birds over there, there are other nature over there. Up to a point they can tolerate. Just like us, we can tolerate noise up to a point, but beyond a point we need to plug our ears. So up to a point a bird or animal can tolerate certain disturbance, but beyond a point it's a tipping point. So then they go extinct. So either they go extinct in that area and they have to move elsewhere, or they go completely extinct. So Salimali is extremely concerned about these. And there are some birds like the great Indian bustard and others that are just reaching that tipping point. They are really vulnerable right now. So he really wants to go whole hog to protect those. And right now, what's interesting, what we can learn from Salim Ali's works of those years, the last century, is that he says in the 1950s or 60s, one of his talks, just look up in the sky, you'll see so many vultures. And what's happened now? We don't see a single vulture in the sky, and that's because of us. It's our anthropogenic interference that has completely wiped out the vultures, and now we have to do artificial breeding and captive breeding to, get them back into the air. So these are all some lessons that one can really learn and from Salim Ali's works. And interestingly, I'm just going back to his gun-toting times, that he also talks about animals in one or two of his talks are about animals. And curiously, I think he's been asked by All India Radio, it's called the External Services, to kind of, lure people for tourism into India for big game hunting. So this is in the 1950s. Huh? And so he actually talks, he says, the hangul are beautiful and they'll make a beautiful trophy. So actually when I was reading that, I was a bit shocked. I said, oh my God, my Salim Ali is saying this, what shall I do? But I realized that this is change as a human being. When he was young, he was actually a hunter. He has admitted to hunting bears and even, I think, tiger, I'm not sure. And it was a done thing to do when he was young. But when the laws came in 1970s, the Indian Wildlife Protection Act, he completely changed his views. He dropped his gun. And he said, he admits honestly, I'm putting down my gun, not because I'm sorry that I killed these animals, but more because I'm seeing the decline in their populations. I'm seeing how birds and animals have declined so badly that I don't want to shoot them any longer. So he admits that in his talks, and in his writings actually he does that as well. So, he had this great vision that birds are not just, something that is one subject or some interest of yours that you just go out. He says that, people think that bird watchers are just, rich people who have nothing else to do but to take out their binoculars and go out. So, but he says that we have a natural connect. They are all part of our universe. And This came out forcefully during the time of the COVID lockdown. When people were alone, they were lonely, they couldn't step out. The outside you look out was all quiet and silent, nobody there. The birds gave them some solace. There's some life out there. Some life out there which still gives you hope, a little bit of solace. And some people actually took to photographing them from their windows and took a bit more interest in birds after that. So that's kind of a emotional connect as well, which he wanted to also emphasize. So have I gone off? Right. So in between all this, in his writings and his talks, he comes out with some lyrical language. He actually was very fond of poetry. Apparently, he was apart from being a outdoors man, wearing chunky boots all the time, but he loved poetry as well. So his language suddenly becomes lyrical. Now look what he's saying, that the sunbird looks like a gem when it flits from flower to flower. Then he describes the beautiful tinkling warble of a fantail warbler. He talks in that kind of a lyrical language. And all this is just to, make people love birds and understand them and conserve them. So that is Salim Ali's words for birds. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you. Fascinating.
Oh, good.
Rightfully it's been said that Salim Ali is the father of Indian ornithology,
Yes.
which he is. But by the same token, there a lot of work has been done since he was here, and work on migration, on conservation. And today, because both Rahul and Nilofer were very keen that we also talk about conservation in India and the climate change. So may I ask you one or two bird-related questions?
Not too difficult.
Not too difficult.
Yeah.
One of which, of course, which you alluded to, which was vultures.
Yeah.
As you know, India lost 90% of its vultures over 2 years. Suddenly, we had vultures everywhere. You could see them on the road, and suddenly you couldn't see them anymore. So we started very close to Kasauli, actually, in Pinjore, vulture breeding center. How successful has it been? Or is it too late? Or is the work that's being done is too slow? Or have we lost vultures forever?
The good news is that actually these vulture conservation centers, the artificial breeding centers, captive are doing well. There's not only in Pinjore, there's one in West Bengal, and then now they're starting more. And that was done by the Bombay Naturalist Society. And I suppose everybody knows why the vultures declined. It's because farmers were feeding their cattle, injecting some, it's a drug called diclofenac, which they were injecting to their cattle to save them from pain. And when those cattle died, that diclofenac chemical remained in the carcasses. And when the vultures fed on those carcasses, somehow they were terribly sensitive to them. The minute they fed on those carcasses which had diclofenac in them, they died. So that was really amazingly, it was something that was mind-blowing. We don't know how it happened so fast. And so now the breeding centers are doing well, but vultures are very slow breeders. They take a long time to grow, and they take a long time to lay their eggs, and the eggs take long to develop and become adults themselves. So they're doing it in a very nice way. They are breeding them, they are training them to fly, and they're training them to, hunt for themselves and not be reliant, and they don't allow human touch too much. They don't allow them to get accustomed to humans much. So they're doing a very good job of it. And slowly they're releasing them. Every now and then you'll see in the papers, 5 were released, 6 were released. But it's going to take a long time for the whole population to revive, Yeah.
Well, I hope it does, because there is a school of thought saying that it's too slow. And but actually, if you go to Madhya Pradesh and other places in Rajasthan, you started seeing vultures in the wild, which now brings me to the next question, which is India, as you know, lost 4 birds. 4 birds became extinct, 2 were refound, of which one is probably gone extinct again, the Jordan scosser. But there are lots of others, including your biggest bird, heaviest bird in India, the great Indian bustard. And there are some saying that maybe there are only 50 left. And I personally think there's only between 50 and 100 left. So it's very much in the sort of departure lounge. Are we doing enough? Is there enough work? They have started an artificial breeding center in Jaisalmer. But is this enough, or is it too late for this? And along with that, there are the floricans, Bengal and the lesser, both are also less than 200.
You're right, they are very much on the brink. It's actually a very sad situation, but it's all to do with habitat. You know, earlier bustards used to be hunted. The great Indian bustard because it's a beautiful bird and it's a great trophy and a lot of meat. So it was being hunted, and also it was a fashion. I think there were people from, to hunt bustards. So that brought about a huge decline. But now it's more question of their habitat. See, they are trying to put electric lines in the habitat. That's a big problem.
Yeah.
And so when these buster heavy birds, when they fly and they hit the line, they die. So these kinds of the people are trying to work towards it. They're trying to put those lines underground, and that's a certain consciousness. But it is a difficult situation. It is a worrisome situation. And the florican needs grasslands. And now grasslands are the most neglected habitat in India. Everybody says, oh, yeah, but it's ghas, let's grow trees on it. So the minute you grow trees on it, it's useless for the florican, So this whole aspect of wasteland is completely a wrong word. Now they're starting to say wasted land, which is a slightly better terminology to say. But definitely it needs this kind of extensive grasslands to be able to survive. And that's very hard to protect.
Are people really concerned? Is that the problem? That people are just not interested? Whether you have grasslands or your water is polluted or the burgeoning population is taken over wasteland or wasted land, or?
Yes and no. Yes and no. I mean, a lot of people are deeply concerned. A lot of people are doing a lot of work. But as always in India, whatever you do is sometimes not enough. There are local organizations now, apart from the major wildlife organizations and ecology-centered organizations. There are a lot of institutions now that are coming up with scientists, biologists, nature workers, conservationists, practical application of conservation, not just the science of it and study it, but how do you apply it? How do you apply your science to protect a grassland? How do you apply your science to protect a forest? So all that is happening maybe because I'm in the field, I see so much of it. So I feel heartened. At the same time, I feel depressed. So it's like a roller coaster ride. One moment you're heartened, one moment you're depressed. So there are. So that's why I said yes and no. There are a lot of people who are interested, passionately interested, but a lot of the powers that be have vested interests. So when there's a vested interest in overtaking that particular space, then you have a very big problem. Now people want to build new airports. They want to build, of course, lots and lots of infrastructure. And we talked about dams, we talked about all this, railways. All are going through these kind of habitats. So how do you get that balance? And that is the kind of balance that we have to aim for.
Well, I'm going to ask you a little contentious question.
Oh, no.
People, you recently read about the reintroduction of the African cheetah.
Oh.
I'm sorry to do this to you, but this is too good an opportunity to miss. What is your opinion? Is it essential for us, when our other wildlife is really, really deteriorating, to introduce an almost exotic animal back into this countryside? Is there a scientific basis for it? Is there an emotional basis for it? Is there a political basis for it? What is your opinion on this?
Well, you really have put me in a fix there, Bikram. I thought you were a friend, all right? No, it's a very, very contentious issue. It's been, the past 2 months, my head has been kind of churned with 25 different opinions on this. And so, let me just give you an overview of what I have heard. Because I'm not able to myself, I'm not a wildlife person, I'm not a cheetah person, or a big mammals person, so I don't have a passionate interest in that. But what people have been saying, that's an exotic animal, apparently genetically there's no difference. It's a very, very minor difference at all. So the African cheetah that's coming into India is genetically, I'm told, not different from the Indian cheetah. So to that extent, we're okay. And the other rather thought that I have been hearing is that, this was talked about a long time ago. There are letters that were exchanged about cheetah reintroduction about 20 years ago, more than that, about nearly 20 years ago. And, but didn't happen. So then they prepared these 3 or 4 different habitats. Apparently, the wildlife people were asked to go and select 2 or 3 different places where the possibility of a reintroduction of cheetah could happen. So it chose 3 or 4 places. So finally of that, this one was chosen, Kuno. This was chosen as the most feasible and all that. So the process started much earlier, but somehow it came to a standstill. And somehow now it has caught on and it has happened. So it's not as though, it's not politically, of course, perhaps mileage is coming out of it. We don't know why the previous political parties didn't take it forward at that time. We don't know. At least I don't know. Somebody may. I mean, I've been hearing so much every day, and I open my computer or open my phone. There are 20 different opinions about the cheetah. So I really won't hazard much more than that. But apparently the place that the
Kuno Palpur.
Palpur is a good habitat.
Yes, it was
it's
started,
a good habitat.
It has been chosen for the lion.
Chosen for the lion.
And,
yeah.
But they brought this and they're keeping it very secret. We tried to get into Kuno Palpur recently, last week, and they wouldn't let us. They won't even let the officers of the Forest Department of Madhya Pradesh enter. But that's...
no, let's not talk about that.
Let's not talk about that. But I'm going to talk to you...
Let's talk about birds.
One small thing, which is, I'm going to end with that, Rahul, because we have to talk about a little bit about green. The biggest problem, and all of you are going to hate me for this, so please let me put the caveat that I do not necessarily believe it. The biggest problem in India, mostly to birds, is not degradation of conditions, but the feral dog. Today, the black-necked crane of Ladakh, the numbers have dropped to a handful. In the last 3 weeks, 2 of the 4 chicks were killed by dogs. Every bird, every animal, tigers, hyenas, leopards are being attacked by dogs that have gone wild. And there has been a big movement from Indian wildlifers that the law be changed to shoot a feral dog on sight. Whether you believe in it or not is a controversial thing, but this is genuinely one of the biggest problems. And these birds have been, these dogs have been attacking birds like the great Indian bustard chicks or the Florican chicks or the black-necked crane chicks or even the Saras crane chicks. So 50%, 60% of the destruction of eggs in India is taking place because of these dogs which are found all over. So with this very unhappy note, thank you. Tara, is there anything which you tell us about will bring joy back to our lives? On the success of the various things that we have done?
Can we open it
Yeah,
up to
yeah.
a question and answer session?
Oh.
Is that yeah?
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
there time?
Rahul.
Is there time? Okay, fine.
We can take 2 questions.
No, this is
Yeah,
Rahul
sure.
Baba. He's the boss. We have to listen to him. Right?
Okay.
No, but your question first.
Doesn't have a question.
Yes. Audience question, please. Hands up. Is there anybody who would like to ask?
Glad.
Yes, please. Yes? Acha, sorry.
Thank you, Tara, for a lovely presentation. Really, it's so charming to hear of Salim Ali and his commitment to birds. I had a couple of questions which, but I'll confine myself to one, well, maybe 2. One is the handbook or the shoulder or backpack book. Where is it accessible to the public in central libraries and so on? Because it's certainly not something you would keep in your home necessarily for most people. And that relates to my second question, which is one of Salim Ali's big things was to present to children. And so whether birding societies now are doing any outreach to children, because I think one way to educate is
the children.
children.
It's the only way to go forward.
Yeah.
Tara.
Okay, just before I answer you, Indira, I've got to contradict what you say, Bikram, because I feel it's not only children, I feel it's adults who have to be educated a lot, because they are the ones who still have, and I would say the people who are in their 40s or in their 30s who still have, 6 decades of destruction to do, they are the ones who have to be stopped right now, because they are in the place where they can do a lot of destruction. Yes,
Agreed.
so children, of course.
Agreed.
Children, of course, you have to tell them, but the adults need a lot of things. So, Indira, thank you. Yes, that book is available now online, because they brought a condensed version of it. You can buy it from the Bombay Naturalist Society on a pen drive. So that's available, but libraries do have it. Libraries
There's both a hardback
Yeah.
edition and paperback
Yeah.
edition.
Amazon
has it.
Oh,
Yes,
does
sir.
it? Oh, that's good to know.
It has
That's
it.
good to know.
It has
And and what you said, children are being, roped in a lot, and they are so interested. It's very heartening to see that. Most nature groups are now dealing with children as well.
In Punjab, small sparrow was very common. And Lok Geet, Chiriyan Rachambai, we are not seeing those sparrows anymore. Any hope of their revival?
Well, Tara, that's
Yeah.
your...
You see, actually, the sparrows have moved away from the cities. They are not in the cities any longer. But in the rural areas, they are still there, which is nice to know, especially in villages where there are still thatched roofed houses and houses which have got tiles on top, the terracotta tiles. So those in those places, sparrows are surviving. I know that, and even I live in Chennai. If I go outside Chennai a little bit into the more wild areas, the sparrows are surviving. So that's actually very heartening to know that they are not really in danger. They've only moved away from the cities because we don't have the kind of spaces that they like. And we don't. Earlier we used to separate the stones from our rice, and a little bit of grains used to fall, and they used to come and eat. Now we have our packaged foods, so they don't have what they need.
Also concretization of buildings.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
have very little place to
Yeah.
breed.
They don't have spaces to breed.
But it is there, and in India you have about 5 or 6 different kinds of sparrows. I'm very happy to say, other than the house sparrow that we are talking about, the Singh, the yellow-throated Petronia and others, there's not been that badly affected, not as badly as affected as some of the other birds. I think we should just stick to birds, but this is a very contentious issue. And there are people who are dog lovers who hate the idea of either stray dogs. I'm talking about stray dogs. There are people who feed stray dogs, right? There's a huge industry of pet food, which are people who are doing stray dogs. But I think it falls outside the purview of this particular talk. But yes, it is a problem, and we have to look at it very, very carefully.
Thank you very, very much for a wonderful session.
I'm glad. Thank you.
Come.